If you want your mind blown, buckle up. Today we're going to spit a little knowledge. The first thing to understand is that your mark matters. Whether your mark is on the inside of a ring, whether your mark is on a document on your mortgage, or whether your mark is on a stone that goes onto a building that indicates who made that mark. Now, to understand this next part, you have to understand why this is important. And sometimes it doesn't matter, but what if you wanted to know? What if you wanted to know about the history of that marking on the inside of a ring, or the history of a legal document, or the history of somebody who put together a building? Well, that history or that story becomes part of your narrative. That part is important, it's interesting, it's fascinating. It's kind of the richness of curiosity that inspires all human beings. And sometimes what you don't know is the most interesting part of all. So let's go on a little historical trip. First of all, understand that human beings weren't always literate. People were out there, they were serfs, they were peasants. They weren't necessarily all scholars, tumbling over the tomes of history. No, these were people who were doing what they had to do, pulling together what they had to do, maybe turning straw and mud into bricks, or in certain cases, quarrying out stone out of, or pulling out stone out of a quarry. Well, those people then would build things. And when they built things, at least the old stonemasons from the old Stonemasons Guild, which Freemasonry is related to, those are the folks that you wanted to know what those buildings were or how solid those buildings were. You wanted to have the name of the person or an indication for the person who put that building together. That's when the mark came into play. Back in the 1600s, probably even before then, the mark was used to, by the stonemason, he would chisel his mark into a building, or into a, more specifically, a block that would be cemented into that block. Those stones would come together, and as that building was put together, oftentimes you would have cathedrals, which people who understood geometry could pull together, and they would have these large sweeping walls that were mostly stained glass. And how did those walls come together? How these flying buttresses, they used to call them, come together without falling apart? Well, they understood geometry, but they also needed to have a stonemason, someone from the Stonemasons Guild, who would take credit for something if there was a problem. They would effectively pin the blame on that person. But at the same time, the person, if they did a great job, they were also very proud of their work. But we still use that same process and those same indications today. Sometimes you might find a goldsmith who puts his mark on something. And take this case of a piece of jewelry that was crafted by a person who ended up going down with the Titanic. They have a specific mark on their piece of jewelry, and that indicates that it was made by a specific jeweler. And now you can go back and trace that back and say, wow, that ring was made by that person who ended up going down with the Titanic. That's interesting. That makes it rare. That adds to the story. Now, sometimes a mason might have a ring, and it means something to them. It doesn't necessarily mean that it comes from some super secret cabal. In my case, my ring I chose from a pile of a couple of other rings that another brother had. Now, I'm going to give you an example. In my case, after I became a Mason, my wife got me some cufflinks. They're very nice cufflinks. They mean a lot to me. They were the first emblem that I had that had the square and compass on. Well, it just so happened that this other brother, who goes around to different jewelry shops and has a relationship where he can purchase rings for the cost of this scrap gold, well, he happened to go to this jewelry shop and buy a whole bunch of rings for the cost of scrap gold, and this happened to be one of them. And then it just happened to be the same design as the one that my wife bought. Now, interestingly enough, this ring, it doesn't have a whole lot of markings on it. It doesn't tell me a whole lot. It just has a little 10, and I happen to know that means that it's 10 karat gold. The inside is kind of hollow, not particularly valuable, but it means something to me. Why? Because it adds to the story and because it matches the cufflinks that my wife got me. And that is what makes it valuable to me. So that's why marks, even though they were from before, have connections to the history right now, and it tells a story. And that's what makes it valuable to me. And that's some of the riches of Freemasonry.